Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Timeless. So in this episode, we had the team going back to 1972, particularly the Watergate incident, and essentially, this episode kind of helped me, first of all, a little historically, because I'm not all that familiar with what the whole Watergate situation was really about. I know of it, but not really in any of the intricate details of what Nixon did that was so wrong. But now I'm like, oh, okay. He basically hired some people to kind of allegedly hired some people to steal some stuff from the DMC or something like that. So some documents and stuff like that. But nevertheless, why this is such an important time is because apparently during the recordings of Nixon, his conversation, there's like an 18 minutes that were forever lost to time because basically Nixon had his secretary delete it and everything, and everyone's supposed to go back in time to, they're supposed to be there to try and stop Flynn from doing whatever he's doing. Rufus, on the other hand, got contacted by Rittenhouse, the old guy that he ran into before, and he shows up with Mason and everything. He's like, yo, so I want you to go back in time and destroy it, so make sure that no one hears it. You don't hear the recording, Lucy doesn't hear it, Wyatt doesn't hear it. Make damn sure that Flynn doesn't hear it. And it's like, if I don't, like, what is this all about and everything? It's like, you don't get to know what everything's about. Just know that if you don't do it, your family's life is in danger. And then Mason is like, shut up, he'll do it, so stop with all the threats and everything. So the whole, but what makes this episode fantastic is because everything that's been, all the secrets and lies bubble to the surface and everything comes out because Flynn captures them and brings up Lucy's dirty little secret about the journal and everything, and was like, whoa, you've been hiding this from us? Because that was something I was bringing up the entire time. Why has Lucy kept that from them? She found out about the journal back in episode 1, but she didn't say jack squat the entire time to anyone. But then you kind of understand her reasoning for it, which she kind of explains it. It's because she was scared to, because it's like all the stuff that Flynn is doing is based on what she's telling him to do or what should happen in that journal, meaning that she, in some shape or form, is responsible for him committing the atrocities. All his atrocities are basically on her. Maybe it's not directly her, but it is future her, and that's still her nonetheless. And so I guess at any point in time, that is kind of enough to weigh on someone's shoulders. And what I really like is the fact that Rufus starts tearing it down. Like, how can you not tell us about that? You lied to us and everything. And then like Lucy's like, I'm sorry, Rufus. Didn't you ever have a deep dark secret that you were scared of telling about? And then it clicks and it's like, oh yeah, I do. Which even his secret ends up coming out because he ends up telling her the truth, kind of getting rid of that flash drive recording device thing and being like Rittenhouse. Like, it's just overall a crazy episode just because we found out a little bit more about Rittenhouse. Like, for one, the thing that they were meant to get is called a document or whatever, which they learned about this information because essentially I'm all over the place. I'm sorry. First of all, I'm like to mention the fact is they met Deep Throat, and I love the fact is and she's like, you know Deep Throat, and then he's like, I don't. She's like, you don't know Deep Throat. He's like, I know the porn. I'm like, first of all, why would you admit that? Why, like, don't admit that that's your reference when it comes to Deep Throat is that 70s porn movie. Don't reference that. Don't make that known. I mean, I guess it says a lot. The fact is that I understood the reference the moment he made it. I was like, porn. I was like, what is he? And it just clicked in my head. I was like, oh, why would you admit that though? And Lucy had no reaction to it too, so it just kind of like probably just ignored it. It's like, okay, I'm just full steam ahead or whatever. But ends up finding out that's all connected to the Black Liberation Army. And I love what Rufus says. He's like, okay, I've actually kind of had a bit of a military phase back in the day because this is the BLA is something even Lucy, being the historian that she is, even she's not familiar with the particular chapter of them that was there in Washington. And he's saying, and then Rufus is like, well, the fact of the matter is I learned all about them because I was in my military phase. Meaning I was in a military phase because I had a crush on a girl who was in the military and stuff like that. And Lucy's kind of like, of course. And it kind of got the roles reversed in this episode because normally it's like, Rufus, you got to wait out here, it might cause some problems or whatever. So Rufus kind of got it this time. It's like, maybe it'd be better, Lucy, if you wait out here and just don't, it'll be fine. Just don't talk to anybody. Don't make eye contact with anyone. So it finally got on the other shoe. But ultimately, this all led to them to something called Doc. everyone just assumed it meant a document, but apparently it's not a document. It is actually a person. This lady actually used to be part of Rittenhouse herself, and she actually explained some very interesting things. That for one, Rittenhouse is extremely old, which is the reason why Flynn's doing all this, trying to get rid of Rittenhouse. She goes as far back as saying like, oh yeah, Rittenhouse existed back in 1778 is when it was formed. It's like 2 years after the Declaration of Independence is formed. That's why Flynn is trying to destroy America bit by bit, because Rittenhouse is so integrated into American history that it's hard to separate the two. So it's kind of like you kind of destroy it all, pick up the remaining pieces, and try to rebuild from there. Because you end up hearing the whole conversation from Flynn when he's talking to Wyatt and everything. For Flynn, he's part of the NSA. He ended up picking up some information about all this offshore money being funneled towards Mason and his whole business about starting time travel. Well, the fact is, Flynn brought that up to his superiors, and his superiors like, we'll handle that. Next thing he knows, his wife and daughter are killed. He's like, he even says that sad thing of like, silencers aren't actually that silent that you can, they do make a very distinct sound. So he, and he couldn't do anything about it because like Wyatt's like, oh, you didn't fight or anything? And they're like, he's like, no, I couldn't. There was pitch black. There was too many of them. But that's his reason for doing all this. He's like, Wyatt's like, why don't you go back in time and just save them? He's like, the same reason why you don't go back in time and save your wife. You can't influence your own direct. You can't be a part of your own history, like, the whole paradox of it all. Like, that's the question, though. Like, because I feel like that's going to be a storyline element, but I'm curious to see whether it's actually, like, even if they're going to end up winding up at some point in that a particular time period connected to them all. And I'm curious, like, I keep using the example of Wyatt's wife, like, the day she died or whatever. And I'm thinking this is all a lot more connected than you think. Because the fact is, Rufus is working for Mason, and so he's kind of under Rittenhouse control. Lucy and everything, knowing everything that she does. The guy that answers the door at the end of the episode, do let me know, because I might be completely crazy. Isn't that the same dude that was talking to Rufus? Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. To me, it looked like it was, but it was most likely like a different guy. But he was like answering the phone at the end. It's like, oh, guess who just came to me? Because, I'm going all over the place. But the point is, Rittenhouse is a legacy thing. It's passed down from family member to family member. It's a generational, like I said, a generational legacy thing. So Doc herself, for example, was born into it. So maybe Lucy's connected to it as well. Because as you can see, Rittenhouse has got their hands in everything connected to American history. And maybe not just American history, because America dabbles with everything around the world as well. So maybe they have a finger in everything else around the world too, in some shape or form. They're just like this, kind of like an Illuminati level organization that's existed for hundreds of years, that's been behind the scenes of things. And, that's what Flynn is trying to do. He might seem like a mad, crazy man, but maybe that's the reason why he does what he does. And maybe that's why Lucy writes this journal, because maybe the journal that Lucy writes is from the perspective of when it's all said and done. So maybe at the time Lucy wrote that journal and gave it to Flynn, it was to set this all in motion so that they could eventually go through time and fix it. Kind of like, the loop of like, hey, I wrote this journal to give to Flynn, which sets everything in motion, which sets me, Rufus, and Wyatt going on an adventure to try and stop them, which will eventually lead to me writing the journal to give to Flynn, and so forth and so on. Like I say, an endless cycle. But at the time when you look at, maybe once that's all said and done, maybe the moment Lucy passes the journal on, then it all disappears type of, I don't know, like, because it's really, like I said, it also depends on, because every show has its own rules for time travel. There's obviously some crossover between everyone's concepts of time travel. There's the basics, but then just the overall rules of it all, like, traveling to your own history and stuff like that. It's fine depending, you take something like Legends of Tomorrow. Martin's had multiple interactions with younger Martin without any, obviously there were some ramifications because his wife him and his wife never actually got together, so that kind of erased her from his timeline and everything like that for moment to time, just using that for example. So, but what makes Doc so special is because in her head is every member's name, because their names are not to be written down, because it's like, oh, a written down piece of paper can be tracked. A person's memory, you can't hack that. You can't steal. Technically you can. That's the whole reason why Flynn wanted her, because he was going to get the names from her. Most likely kill her afterwards. But you had that moment where Rufus and Lucy kind of set everything up. They brought Lucy called Flynn, and then Rufus called Rittenhouse, and they all came together to that particular place where Doc was, but they were already gone. It was a setup. Which also, you gotta give props to Wyatt, like picking that lock with that little needle that he was picking up out the entire time. Then got free, kicked some serious ass, almost got away until he got caught again. But then when Lucy freed him later on, he kicks that dude's ass, and you have Lucy picking up that lamp and be like, "Oh, you could?" Like she was really about to do something with it. Which, I mean, she was trying to help out and everything. And Wyatt's just kind of like, just put the lamp down and come on. Just like I said, overall, a very amazing episode in that regards of just like everything happening. But all this does put a damper on them because it's like, when it was all said and done, like, what was like 2 episodes ago, Wyatt was all being like, oh man, I trust my team and everything. The reason why he's staying with them is because he trusts them and everything. And it's like, now that's literally all gone. Was that last week's episode or was that the week before? Nevertheless, it's like he brought that up, like he trusts them, and now that trust is gone. He's telling Rufus, hey, you're going to be our double agent. You're going to keep recording us, but at the same time, you're going to learn more about Rittenhouse. And then he's like, you know, because for Lucy, it's like, you kept this secret from us. We're supposed to be a team. And it's like, I trusted both of you. And now I trusted you both before. Now I can't do it. I can't trust either one of you. And, you know, even have Rufus being like, well, tell me everything will be okay. But Lucy can't tell him that because what was built between them, they were legitimate friends. Because side note, we really don't hear about any of them really having any friends. We don't really see Lucy hanging out with any friends. I mean, granted, like we've seen very little of her personal life, but definitely the same thing with Rufus. So I'm thinking, aside from each other, it's not just being colleagues; they're friends, and so it's kind of sad. There was even a moment where, Flynn was reading out Lucy's journal because basically she kind of did a blow by blow of basically what happened with Wyatt's wife, which was that brought up before that she was strangled. I think this is the first time they brought up how she was actually killed. But bringing that up, and it even says in the note, like she's like, Wyatt needs to learn to let go, like essentially let go of her. But then Flynn's like, that's impossible. When you have someone that you love taken from you and you have the power to change that, you're never going to let them go. It's not that easy. And so that's why I'm thinking, you know, especially because at the end when we see Wyatt, he's staring at the wall, basically him documenting the whole situation, I guess trying to get a better understanding of what happened to his wife. I'm feeling like that's eventually going to push him to try and do this whole thing, like screw the consequences, to try and save his wife. I feel like that's what, I mean, definitely it's not going to be a next week thing because from what the little bit I saw in the next week's episode, they're going to 1754, so obviously not, but we just have to see. I'm just very curious to see how they're going to come together, like how this all going to work out. Because Rufus ends up finding out the person he kept talking to on the phone about Rittenhouse, like that person he was reporting to and everything, it's the same dude that he's talking to now. He's like, oh, I've been waiting 44 years to get your answer, to talk to you like this and everything. So I was wondering how the truth was going to come out. I wasn't expecting everything to come out in a single episode. I was halfway expecting like Rufus to continue lying and stuff like that. But part of me was like, this is the perfect opportunity to come clean. It's because Lucy's coming clean, so it's time for you to come clean. I mean, but really, he didn't come clean necessarily on his own volition. It's only because Lucy popped up. But it's also because it's like, they're threatening to kill Doc, and he didn't want her to die. So he was just like, no, we got to stop this, so I hope that in the near future we do get a little bit more understanding of how Rittenhouse became to be, like how they got their roots started, like how this whole legacy thing. And like I said, it does seem like it's all connected to everybody's lives. So I'm feeling like maybe even the fact is Wyatt's wife dying was also on purpose. Maybe that was all for the purpose of putting them together to eventually play a part in stopping, you know, Flynn. Like, you know, it's just like, maybe the whole reason why Mason built this time machine in the first place wasn't for his own, like, discovery and everything like that. Maybe Rittenhouse kind of put him on that path to make it because it's like they're already a very powerful organization. So maybe it's like you add in time travel and they'll be unstoppable. They'll be able to rewrite history in their own making. And maybe that's what Rittenhouse is all about, trying to gain control of everything. The reason why, because maybe they already know about a lot of what's happening with Lucy in the journal, for the reason why they want Rufus to record their conversations, because maybe they have some knowledge about that. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, you had Lucy and Rufus kind of bringing up the conversation of like, oh, what about Doc? Was she okay and everything? But Lucy couldn't really find anything. So I'm hoping on everything that she did do okay, that she was able to get back to her family. That's the main reason why she ran, because she didn't want to be a part of that world and be raising a child and everything. So hopefully back in the 70s, they were able to get away, but we'll just kind of have to wait to see whether that's something that was kind of dealt with. Because the fact of the matter is, you even have the Rittenhouse guy kind of asking Rufus questions. So nevertheless, so with the questions he's asking, they obviously never caught up to her, but they are asking Rufus all these questions like, oh yeah, how did Flynn find our men? Like, how did they get trapped like that? He's like, I don't know. How does Flynn know anything he knows without complete, because he can't also let them know about what he knows about Lucy's journal too. That's the thing. I'm curious, like, what that all means. Like, is it one of those situations where Lucy, like I said, I brought it up before, the whole loop thing, maybe Lucy wrote it because it was the best situation. Like, maybe it's one of those things where it's like Lucy, maybe that time can change in the sense of Lucy knows that she wrote the book. And so now she knows to kind of go off script, but then it kind of brings in the question of fate. Like, is it that no matter what, things are going to play out a certain way? I mean, as we can see, time kind of changes. It's like, oh, things played out this certain way, but it's like when they're involved in everything, it makes it seem like, okay, things can change. So nothing is 100% set in stone. So it makes you wonder, will knowing about the journal cause Lucy to go down a different path? But then it's like, if she went down a different path, the journal wouldn't exist in the first place. Or maybe she does go down a different path. And maybe what she's writing isn't necessarily telling Flynn what to do. It's what Flynn did. And for things to play out, a necessary evil, Flynn has to do the bad things he does so that her, Wyatt, and Rufus can change it. Like I said, the whole loop thing again. So I don't know. I was just so many questions this episode brought up and gave you a little bit of answers, but also just left so many questions. And I'm very curious to find out what we might find out next episode, what might come up and everything. So. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.